Hola, ¿qué tal? Buenas tardes.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you so much for being here. Both for those of you who are here in person, and thank you to those who are with us on the internet. As you know, this is part of a cycle about democracy and communication, but this is special within this cycle, not only for the guests we have today, but also for the subject we're going to deal about. We talked about how the public space has been restructured and the effect this has had on our understanding of politics. Now we are going to look into more cultural issues with, even if everything has to do with politics, culture has a lot to do with politics, of course. And I believe that one of the conclusions of this meeting is precisely that, how the cultural change has created very important political changes. We have with us today two people who are a luxury for us to have them here. It would be an honor for anyone. One is very well known by the Spanish public, such as Elvira Lindo. She is somehow the image of cultural, popular culture and mass culture. She would perhaps clarify. Everybody knows she's a writer. I must mention her last book because she's elevated her to the Olympus. She is amongst the highest, one of the most important contemporary Spanish writers. In the Mouth of the Wolf, she has been a journalist. She's done radio, TV, journalism. She has been a film director recently. She is, as I said, a journalist. You can read her every Sunday on the newspaper El País, and her column is always the nicest because I look at them because I read the newspaper on Sunday. It is the best, and she's much above mine because of her age there. But thank you so much for being here with us. And Mario Calabresi is a very important person in the Italian culture scene. He's both a writer and a journalist. Has been a journalist for many years, and he's had very relevant jobs. He was the writer of the Stampa and then of the Repubblica, and been switching from what he has been working for ANSA, which is the national news agency in Italy. And now I believe you are having a lot of success with a podcast which is called Cora Media. And we shall all hear it once we hear what you have here. There's a book that's been translated, written by you, which is going out at night, Salir de la Noche, which is about the lead years, which is the time when the recent terrorism age in Italy. So, Mario, I'm going to say the same to you. Thank you so much for being here. It is a real honor to have you here. So let us start from Elvira, because this way we can sort of define the way in which the debate is going. So your culture is not the big initial capital C culture, but there's many different ways. There are many different types of culture, of course, and maybe that's why it'd be good to start hearing your experience in the media, all of them, making a difference between popular culture and the other type of culture. Are there differences the same? I don't think there are differences. I think the change has changed. Well, first of all, I'm delighted to be here. We're friends. We've been friends for many years, and we've met privately. We talked about this and many other subjects, and they've always been interesting. And then I would like, after answering you, I'd like to say something about Mario Calabresi, because it is an honor for us. for him to have come here to talk about this, as he's a person he has so much experience on media, and being someone who's been so influential on how the Italian people feel and think about terrorism. And a year ago it was published here in Spain. I think it has been an absolutely positive effect that it has had in our country. And I was also wondering, I'm worried, I'm concerned by it for a lot of time. And I am in the embodiment of this popular culture because I've done things which are really popular. So this means that from the small, because a book is written in a room alone, so from the small space, which was the first thing I wrote, which was a working class child, and that is a small story of a peripheral borough, which could be Madrid or Rome. It is a book that's been translated into many different languages. From that lonely job, which is writing a book, then there is a flourishing, which becomes something so popular that brings to you some income or benefits that you didn't expect. How many books have you sold? It'd be interesting to see. I don't know, because maybe in 30 years, over the 30 years, maybe 2 million. I don't know, because it's been 7, 8. I don't even know how many books there were in the series. But I know there has been an impact on popular literature, and specifically this character, which was created out of popular culture. It is created as stories are created in popular culture. Let's say it is small experiences, small human experiences. So I didn't pretend, I didn't expect having such a great success. I didn't expect it at all, but I was done it as it was done, as children's stories were done in the old times, when popular culture, well, the term began in the 19th century, I think, and it was related to sort of cultural nationalism, of wanting to claim popular culture of every place for it not to be lost. Somehow, I would say the name of the character Manolito. He was born as a voice in the radio, as the old stories, tales were born. So it is published and become massive, but the way it was born is the same as old stories, old tales. So it has the stamp of cultural, popular culture. There's been some confusion the last few years between popular and mass culture, and that confusion produces a distorting effect. And Mario knows much better than I do. But Pasolini spoke a lot about popular culture, and he spoke about the way in which culture was not done by the intelligentsia, nor by the working class, nor by bourgeoisies. It is a mix of all those things. And what he was saying was that we can do away with illiteracy, we can homogenize this culture, this knowledge, but this creates confusion about what culture is. And I often wonder, because see what critics value, what they appreciate, particularly about TV and networks. A few years ago, there was a much more critical attitude towards what people is watching, and now it is what people consumes most, and that is what we appreciate with is like confusing, as Machado used to say, value and price, because we appreciate mass singers who gather more people in an arena. We have to republish books all the time. We have to say it is constantly. We have to say how many people go to the movies and how many people want to move away from that idea. Not long ago, Francis Ford Coppola said, we are all happy to have spectators, to have audience, but it is not the measure that we should look for. Not the reward we should look for. And we should have a critical sense about what we offer, not quantities. Not long ago, and I'm sorry about mentioning this because Mari is not Spanish, but there's been a lot of controversy about public TV in Spain, whether it had to compete with public TV has to compete with the private TVs, and I was surprised that to protect competence, an article was published by somebody who is a producer of massive programs, not culture, not public culture, but mass culture. And I was surprised that this person said that the Spanish national TV had to compete with private TV. And this is not an authorized voice because it has to be somebody away outside the media to assess what we offer. I don't know if I made myself clear. Well, of course, you have, but anyway, we'll go back onto the subject. Mario, we associate trivialization of public space to a name which is Italian, which is Berlusconi. As far as I know, you have been following the political career of Mr. Berlusconi. And from Spain, we also follow that Italian evolution, of course, due to one basic reason. That is my generation, at least, and Elvira is much younger than I am, of course. But my generation, at least, we who politically started thinking in political terms at the beginning of the 70s, when we started going to university. At that time, Italian culture was a reference point, a key reference point. It was a reference on all fields, the pop music that was being heard here in Spain. It was we listened more to Italian popular music than Anglo-Saxon or American and English pop music, and Italy has a culture behind it, as Italo Calvino used to say, pesante, that is heavy, strong. And all of a sudden, Berlusconi appears on the scene, Channel 5, Telecinque, and there's a change towards a total trivialization from our horizon of information. The cultural element disappears, and as the entertainment model becomes the Italian entertainment model. And then it looks ironic in history. Somebody changes the culture of a country, and that same person becomes the prime minister of that country. So it was like by design that led him inevitably towards that result. How did you live? How did you feel this change? Well, to start with, thank you. Delighted to be here. Thank you for inviting me, for having me. I understand Spanish, but I don't speak it in a dignified way, so I will spare you the suffering. So this title is key. Trivialization of public space. We are living at an age in which everything has been simplified. Everything which appears to be complex was deleted, done away with. They tell us, we're told that for good communication, to communicate well, we have to be really simple, be very direct, because those who read or hear or listen do not have to make any efforts. And at this stage, effort is the most dramatic first point, because understanding of key issues, key factors, and complex ideas requires an effort. No effort, it's difficult to understand complex things without an effort. And the second thing is that you mustn't be required to make an effort, and you mustn't waste time. So it has to be short and simple and quick messages, and we'll come to Berlusconi following this road. Why am I concerned about the trivialization of public space? Because democracy is made up by complexity, nuances, and long times. Democracy is an effort. It is mediating. It's an effort of mediating amongst different subjects. So if we say that the characters of democracy, that is complexity, long timings, and an effort are three things which are no longer any good, then we're saying that democracy is no good anymore. We are saying that the key elements of democracy are no good anymore. If you make an experiment, you go to a school and you say that in China they built a motorway in 1 year, and that the same motorway, if it was built in any European country, it takes between 5 and 10 years to be built, and you ask students, which model is better? Students instinctively say the Chinese model. But then you ask them to think about it, and you say, why? In Spain, France, Italy, Germany, it takes 5 years because you understand what the impact is on people, the impact on environment, and you check the needs of people who live along that road, and that requires time. But without democracy, there's no concern about that. They don't mind if there are storks in the ponds or if there are houses. Everything which is in the way is just swept away and deleted. So democracy is complexity, and everything that seems to be valuable today in trivialization of public space is totally contrary to democracy and long time. So how did we get here? And you say, I come from a country which was produced, or which has produced Silvio Berlusconi, dramatically have to say 100 years ago. It also produced Benito Mussolini. So we have to say that on two occasions, it is two completely different characters, but in 100 years, it created two examples of populism and two types of generations, and two examples. With two examples, because if you think about Francisco Franco or Hitler, they came after Mussolini. There was an example. All the colonels in Greece, Salazar, Donald Trump, he is exactly the same character as Berlusconi. Populism, simplifying debates, and the fact that he appears before the voters. We're talking about two billionaires who come to voters as a common person, the example of the layman. And this is the total cheat, because Berlusconi said, oh, I am a layman. And he flew up and he traveled by helicopter. But Trump says, I am a layman. But I want to be clear about one thing. But to think that one single person, in this case Berlusconi, was capable of changing the public discourse, the Italian public discourse, and the European public discourse, in my view, is wrong. We would attach too much importance to this person, and we take away responsibilities which instead are collective responsibilities by society at large. One man alone couldn't produce this change. So what happened? In my view, the key which Berlusconi has to be read, and trivialization of common space, is the key in which Berlusconi was a salesperson. He was a salesman. He sold houses in the first place. Then he built TV. But TV was not the important thing. It was important to sell the ads, to sell houses and ads. And then he sold, using the same techniques, a political party, a political idea. But what did he do? He was a salesman, and he was a very good salesman. And salespeople are capable of understanding the spirit of times. And if we want to understand what happened, we have to understand it was the spirit of those times where Berlusconi talks. He talks to the people's guts, and exactly the same as Donald Trump. I followed the whole electoral campaign of Barack Obama in the US, and they always surprised when I came back to hear some factory workers who had been laid off, and they were saying, and it was Obama versus Clinton, and they were saying Clinton is talking the elites' language, the strong powers. Donald Trump speaks our language. He talks about our suffering. And I was saying, how is it possible? He is a millionaire. What has it got to do with your life? But the way he simplified the discourse, he was saying things that working class had not heard. If you think that today the left parties are voted in the center, the city center of towns in Milan, Rome, Turin. The Democratic Party is the elite. It is the historical center of the town. The peripheral areas, they voted Lega. They voted Berlusconi. Today they vote for right-wing Giorgia Meloni. The poorest feel better represented by the right wing, the extreme right wing. And we have to understand, but what fertile land has Berlusconi found? Did Berlusconi find? The first was, we talked about my book that was about the lead years, terrorism. Berlusconi was successful in Italy in the 80s. And in the 80s, Italians wanted to go back to live again lightheartedly. They were tired of terrorism, of being afraid of leaving your home. They were tired of blood. And there was somebody who was saying, switch my TV on, you can have fun, you can relax. And people, the common man, thought, oh, that finally, we can't stand that anymore. Because if ideology and intellectual culture have brought, I know I'm opening in inverted commas. It is terribly simplification, but it is the simplification that public opinion has received at that time. If in '68 and the manifestations and protests led to 10 years of mass murder, blood, terrorism. Now we are having fun. Now we have happiness and superficiality. And that is where trivialization came in. And trivialization, and Berlusconi's trivialization was the making people believe that the teacher, the intellectual, the expert, they were all heavy, tiring people. We can live without them. Let's get rid of professors. In Italy, we've also had a Berlusconi 2.0, which was Beppe Grillo. Beppe Grillo was, in my opinion, was even worse than Berlusconi, even more tragic, because he came and told Italians, competencies, having studied means nothing. Everybody's the same. I take to Parliament people who have absolutely no competence, no skill, and that was a total disaster. And then I will stop here for a moment. And then private TV that also came here to Spain with Telecinco. Also, Berlusconi had a lot of court cases, so many trials, I wouldn't even know how many. But the first one I followed as a journalist, as a political journalist, he was here in Spain at the fiscal audience of Madrid, and it was a trial because it was carried out by Baltasar Castor and Carlos Castazana, and it was a trial to Telecinco. Telecinco was taken to court, and the terrible thing to me was that I came here. It was that was end of the 90s, and I was following this trial, and I was surprised because Berlusconi here had ties with a socialist party, Felipe González Socialist Party, and he was protected and defended by socialists, because initially he had been a friend of Bettino Craxi's socialists, but in the meantime he had become a right-wing leader. And in Italy, the left wing was against him, and they came to Spain, and the government here, which was a left-wing government, they were in his favor, and I just can understand. I mean, everything had been blown up. So Berlusconi conquers, wins Italians over by saying it is now time to have fun, to simplify everything. When he becomes a politician, he makes simplification. He makes everything as simple as possible, and he creates a slogan with which he wins elections. And the 4 words is less tax for everyone. A political program of 4 words. In his party, it was called PDS, that was a left-wing democracy party, and the program was 80 pages, this thick. And he, on TV, he was showing this is the left-wing's program. Try and read it if you can. I have only one point in my program. Fewer tax for everyone. You'll all have more money. He won the elections. Dramatically, we understood how this simplifying public debate is devastating. It is really dangerous. Yes. Maybe you want to react. Well, there's so many things Mario has said. I think that a picture that was published yesterday, because I believe that now those characters, they don't even need the media, because they are their own media. They publish their own opinion and their propaganda in their own social media. And the picture shown yesterday, published by Milei on his Twitter, and he was with Elon Musk, and he was dressed as a superhero, and the other guy was Iron Man, and he was Wolverine. This is like the end of the story. And Berlusconi was a pioneer because he used his own media, which you don't need media anymore, but he used his own media to then become a politician. Trump acted on programs which looked like Telecinco, came from Telecinco, to then go into politics. I think he was a politician that we here in Spain, we thought he had no future. Because in our country, he would have had no future. You always think you're different, that you're not gonna fall in that, you're not gonna make that mistake. And we thought that the Spanish people would be able to tell democracy apart from populism. And not even populism, populism. And you thought they'd be able to make a difference. And I remember in the 80s, I worked on the national radio and TV channels, and the Socialist Party started acting on public radio and TV. And many of us who worked on at the radio, national radio, we were expelled. Who picked us up? Berlusconi's TV, Antena 3 and other channels, private channels. But it was Berlusconi's television. What was my feeling there? Within that TV, that television, which was imported into Italy because that type of TV had never been done here. And the feeling being in there and racing for that TV shows, we understood nothing. We didn't even understand what we were writing about. We didn't understand what we were asked. We didn't understand that girls were brought from Milan because here in Spain there were many girls. So we didn't understand why Berlusconi would bring to Spain even the meat, even the flesh, the girls who had to show their bum on TV. Even that was imported from Italy. It was so difficult to understand that I had no vision of future because I thought, oh, this in Spain will not work. Our audience will understand this is so cheesy or so kitsch. It doesn't make any sense. The program doesn't make sense. Women are so obviously sexualized. There's nothing consistent. It's just people coming and going, saying stupid things. Entertainment, as you said, it was so tacky. But even that entertainment had no coherence. It didn't make sense. So it was 2 years when this message was sown and then a success. All of a sudden, people would massively watch those programs, which to me had made no sense. And I believe that something you said, Mario, that almost always we believe that it's somebody's fault, somebody else's fault, or 2 or 3 people's fault, the entrepreneurs, and we never think about collective responsibility, what we buy, what we consume, and those of us who work for them. And I realized that was not the place where I wanted to keep working, because if you kept working in places where these messages are launched, then you end up believing them. Otherwise, you can't work there. It was places where you made a lot of money, and I believe now they are declining. They have been replaced by the media because people don't watch TV anymore. People watch TV on the media and fragmented. It is not watched as it used to be watched. And I don't want to think that it was Italy. I mean, it wasn't Italy. It is an idea. It is an ideology, something completely different. It's something that might have happened in Spain. years later. It's something that's happened in the US, something that has happened in Brazil, something which is happening in Europe. And I believe Berlusconi was a pioneer in the way in which, and Mussolini, but in the way in which Berlusconi was a pioneer, was the way in which he used television in a trivial way, believing that people deserve this fun. We don't have to give him problems. We have to reduce tax and give them entertainment. That was the long and short of it. And that was his election program. But if this was copied by so many countries, then it wasn't just a Berlusconi's idea. I have a question, and I don't know the answer. I have an intuition, and it's a bit comparing this first initial populism after the 30s, after fascism, even the 20s, and in the 80s when Berlusconi appeared in TV in France, but it was associated to private TV, where TV becomes the real media, what people watch. So what is the difference between that populist wave and the populist wave and today's populist wave? Because it is clear there's one thing which is they have in common, which is simplifying things. The civilization of it, and I believe that the great paradox is that the more complex politics become, the simpler becomes the political discourse, because at the end of the day, the political discourse has become just a debate about we and them. That is, define yourself versus the opponent. And that is the essence of populism. Before, it was different. It made more sense as a representation, as representing the common man, the layman. But who was the layman? But we cannot ignore the structural change that's taken place in Europe after the war, which was the bourgeoisie, the appearance of bourgeoisie, those lower classes that all become bourgeois and they all become TV watchers, TV audience. And the advertising language and that entertainment which was necessary for the storytelling of advertisement, they become infotainment and the search of connecting everything with distraction. But distraction has two meanings. In one way you say I'm absent-minded and I am entertained, but when I am absent-minded means I'm not paying attention. That is, people are not really understanding what is happening, really not watching what's happening. In Italy, with the crises that took place, famous crises of the Mason P2 Loggia, that's when people became aware, and the loss of confidence in politics, and there was a rush towards trivialization and the world of entertainment. But I think that focusing in that way was different. But to me, it is not clear what is really at the bottom of it, because apparently now it is a populism which is more oriented towards looking for the opponent abroad, the immigrant, and we becoming stronger with our national identity. But back then it was more the layman versus the rich or the elites. I don't know if you agree with that, but I think the politics is ever more polarized. I believe there are two different parallels. There's one parallel between populism of today's right wing, which I can find here in Spain, Abascal, Meloni, or in France with Le Pen in France, in Hungary, in the US. And everything is done the same way as 100 years ago, with an enemy. We, them. We have to fight to protect ourselves against our enemies. And the enemies, maybe the immigrants, the foreigners in Italy. It's fun. It's ridiculous because Salvini and Marine Le Pen apparently are friends, but then the French are enemies for Salvini and Italians are the enemies for Le Pen. So I don't know how they can get along. But this, same as 100 years ago, as the populism in the 20s and in the 30s, the mechanism of the enemy is the same. Berlusconi's attitude was slightly different, but there was something similar there with the 20s and the 30s populism. And it was personalization, that is, placing the political person at the center. I'll give an example. In the last few days, I've read a book in which there are letter exchanges between two Italian politicians who were really important in the 60s and 70s. Aldo Moro, who was then kidnapped and murdered by Brigate Rosse, terrorists, in 1978, and Pietro Nenni. Nenni was the Socialist Party leader. They were enemies, but their letters are wonderful. They're an exchange of cultural debate in which none ever was offending or insulting the other, even when they thought differently. They thought differently, but they were looking for a common place, a common land for reforms to be implemented. When Berlusconi's world arrives, that instead is a world where the enemy, the opponent is the enemy, which has to be laughed at, has to be slurred and slanted, and the metaphor becomes that of football. Let's not forget another important aspect of Berlusconi. He's also the owner of a football team, the Milan. So Berlusconi believes there's an opponent and you have to win. You have to vanquish. But in football, you can't stop and start talking to the other team and say, let's agree on something. Of course not. If the model is the football model, you have to win and the other one has to lose. I remember that on a TV debate between Berlusconi and an opponent, at one point Berlusconi said to the opponent who was asking to explain some political issue, and he said, "How many Champions Leagues have you won?" And the problem was that he said, same as Elvira, well, it's so terrible, nobody will vote him. And everybody was saying instead, he's a genius, he won the Champions League. And the Socialist Party's leader hasn't, so he's better. And everybody was saying, well, how is it possible that this is the debate now? But Moro and Nenni, they never put their private lives in politics. Aldo Moro would go to the beach early in the morning to walk, and he would wear trousers and a shirt, and the daughter who asked him, "Daddy, why do you not wear a swimsuit when you go to the beach?" And he was saying, because I represent a public office, and a public office cannot wear a swimsuit. When I'm finished being an officer, when I am no longer a prime minister, then I will wear a swimsuit and I will take a bath and I will swim. But so long as I am a prime minister, I will not wear a swimsuit. Populist policies such as Mussolini would go bare-chested. He would be shown, he'd show himself in his villas on the sea. But this happened before Berlusconi. Before Berlusconi did, information did that. The fault here, the blame here is the information's fault. Because those who informed thought it had to be more fun, more entertaining. So informers, so there had to be gossip, backstage, talking about love affairs, politics, love affairs, and what they ate, not what they debated, what they discussed, what they ate, where they went on holiday, what gifts they buy for their wives on Christmas, what they wear, what clothes they wear. François Mitterrand, the French president, had a partner for many years, and he had a daughter, Mazarine, and the newspapers knew, but nobody talked about it ever for 20 years. Why did they talk about it? Because they thought it was more important to talk about the policies Mitterrand wanted to implement, not the fact that he had a daughter. Franklin Delano Roosevelt had poliomyelitis and he was in a wheelchair. Photographers and journalists knew, but nobody ever took a picture of him on a wheelchair, on his wheelchair. When he had to take a picture, he would stand using support, and it would not. People wouldn't know he was on a wheelchair. Did people talk about it? No. What was important was his New Deal policy, not his wheelchair, not his legs, his head, but journalism started giving more importance to private habits than to public behaviors. And when you mix and you confuse public and private, then it is natural that Berlusconi, when politics become entertainment, the man who was the king of entertainment, he becomes a politician. It's natural. There's nothing that needs to be explained. And this was the change. But Zelensky, what was he? He was a comedian. He had a TV program where a comedian became a prime minister or a president. And then he thought, well, should I run for president? And he became a president. In Italy, Beppe Grillo, he was a comedian. And then he said, maybe I can be the prime minister with the same program I had as a comedian. And he managed it, and he made it. Boris Johnson, he was a bit of a comedian, wasn't he? And he became British Prime Minister. Donald Trump, totally. And he's become the POTUS. P-O-T-U-S. Well, now they even need to come from comedy. Because if we remember, I was really scared when Podemos got into the court, the parliament. There was a desire of being spontaneous, lack of formality, and then it had been something which is not good for institutions, which is politics is a theatre act all the time. Theatralization. Yes, Fernando, that's what you said. What's the difference? The populism of then, how different was it from today's? It is not necessary to win a war, nor to do a coup d'etat, nor to have a dictatorship. It is not necessary. These people may have a supposedly democratic life and live in that supposedly democratic environment, but there are things which are being standardized, and initially we think they can't happen. I remember when I used to see Berlusconi, And I was wondering, how is Berlusconi going to be in the European institution? How is he going to behave? Yeah, he was doing that. He was doing that sign with his hands, with his fingers. And initially, you were really surprised because he was so clumsy. He made chauvinist jokes. He made comments about women's body, Macron's wife, but then that becomes normal. It is standardized. So Berlusconi was standardized. Meloni may take a picture with two melons, and Donald Trump might say things about women's bums, and limits have been broken, thresholds have been surpassed, and I believe politics requires certain formality, because if that is the field in which all of us have to be, well, then we should not go beyond the limits, because otherwise there becomes a circus. And that discourse of against the elites, which was something that was repeated so often against Hillary Clinton in the US elections. She is the elite and I'm the lame and the common man. So that was accepted by the cultural world. So we're talking about television, we're talking about masses, we're talking about what is not exactly popular but massive. And when somebody criticizes it, apparently it is done from an elite position. You cannot criticize what people like because then it is an elitist position, and that is a trap that you cannot criticize that. And what television has done, has educated the layman over the years to become what it is now. And the small villages, the rural areas have now been being fled from, and where the companionship there was a television, and the social relationships have been broken. And at a certain age, all people just watch TV only. And I was really surprised some time ago, the Empty Spain is called the program, and you see how those old people are living alone. And of course, television, their houses, is on all day long because they don't have a smartphone, they don't have an iPhone, they're not all day with the media, the social media, they are they're watching TV. Do they like TV? We don't know. Maybe they don't like it, but it becomes the necessary company for a world of lonely beings. And the media have to become entertainment. When you are together, you are having fun. You're not being informed. Another thing that media have been through is that they know they can attract much more audience if they give an opinion. That is, if they have an opinion, if they offer an opinion with which people feel identified. So the level of information which is given now is much lower. And what people require, and I'm an opinionist myself, but what I am most interested about in my newspaper is information. Nevertheless, this has become second choice because what people are attracted by is that you're right about, or you put into form what they think. You put on paper what they think. I'm glad you talked about this because I want you to talk about the present, because we've seen the evolution since the 80s, but in the evolution and the jump over to the social media and digital press and the click dictatorship. There's a video which is absolutely vital. It is the amount that is important, quantity, not quality. And being followed is already having achieved your success. So the political effect is clear. And implicitly, you just said it. If we look at the opinion, the facts are less important. You inform about facts, and they're less important. So from then on, what is really important is the opinion that builds the facts. There's a sentence by Epictetus that says something like, it's not the facts which shock people, but the words about the facts. And I think it is really true. What is important is the words, not the facts. And therefore there is a moving away from honest information, and people make party information. People listen to those who reconfirm their initial opinion, not to compare opinions. So the tougher they are with their opponents, the more successful they are. And that is a technique that Trump manages wonderfully. He just despises the objectiveness of facts. The important thing is how you describe them. And this goes beyond entertainment. We have moved to something which is qualitatively scant, and we've come to the post-truth. So the important thing should be the true information. We have the feeling that nobody believes anything except those about which our group, their own group, is informing them. We see this empirically as long as we are with friends. But I don't know, I mean, where would you see the quality advance, the most relevant thing? The world of TV, which is still pervasive, the world of TV or press, because press seems to be ever less important. TV is still very powerful, radio is halfway there, and of course social media, particularly on a specific demographic range, which is young people, it dominates there. So Mario. Yeah, well, I need to say this. This trivialization, when this trivialization that we've talked about has met and has married technology, that was when disaster took place. Imagine, I have jotted down, yesterday I jotted down a few things. Technology has brought an acceleration. Everything is faster. An acceleration of the mechanism, stimulus, response. So simplifying things. Twitter has introduced the idea of simplifying in information. That is, with a few fonts, with a few characters, you had to say things. And if you couldn't say it in so many characters, then you're out. Simplifying. Facebook, what did Facebook bring to our public debate? The likes. For or against. There weren't nuances, up or down, as in ancient Rome. Imagine the same thumb up or thumb down. This is something I like or I don't like. There's no possibility, well, I like it, but I'd rather it was a bit more this, a bit more that. No, it's either yes or no. Simplifying. What does simplification mean? It means I have to be on one side or on the other. I cannot have any doubts. No. On all things, I have to take part, to take sides, up or down, yes or no. I can't say. I want to be vaccinated, but I am doubtful. No, it is. I am in favor of vaccines or I am against vaccines. And the debate is only about those who say I am for and those who say I am against. But in this type of debate that takes place, you don't look at the value of people anymore. And that's why we have seen on the TV, the televisions of all the world, professors who studied all their lives the immune system. They were saying yes to vaccines. And people were totally ignorant who had studied nothing, who were saying, I am against vaccines. Well, and I was in this TV debate, and I was saying, but we can't place one versus the other. Somebody who's been studying this for 30 years, and somebody that until yesterday he was fixing engines. No, but we have to have the two opinions. The rector of the Stanford School of Journalism, he said that the post-Facebook debate is a debate such that it's such a debate that if today we had concentration camps, as in 1953 in Germany, the journalist would have to leave Auschwitz, take a Jew who is inside Auschwitz, and a Nazi guard, and give them a minute each and hear their opinion for a minute. No, this is not journalism. This is not debate. It's explaining what is happening. It's explaining that that Jew was brought there, and they're making him or her work, and his relatives are in a gas chamber, and that the Nazi guard does not feed him and keeps him a prisoner. It's not taking this opinion and giving them the same importance, losing the opinions, leaving aside the context. With up and down, then context disappears. And then there's Instagram and TikTok. And it's the image. It doesn't matter who you are or what you think. It's important how you appear. It's important if you look good. But this, politics has understood how wonderful this is. And all politicians have bought into it. The first king of storytelling was Tony Blair, the Labour politician, who created storytelling. I followed Barack Obama's campaign. He was saying things which were really nice, in my view. But Barack Obama never answered one question journalists asked him. He prepared a beautiful discourse. He prepared a wonderful scenario. And then he opened his meeting with a U2 music. The atmosphere was fantastic. His sentences were fantastic. When he left, journalists wanted to ask him questions, and he greased them and walked out. I also followed John McCain's campaign, and I shared less what John McCain was saying. But John McCain, every evening, stopped for an hour to answer journalists' questions. He was an old-style politician. No call. And he answered. And you'd ask questions, he'd stand there for an hour and he'd answer all the questions. I remember one evening I was at the New York University and Barack Obama said, I promise you, as soon as I get to the White House, I will shut Guantanamo down. Every young man at the university was applauding and clapping their hands. And the journalist said, it's impossible to close Guantanamo down because Bush took people outside the law from Afghanistan, brought them there, Many of them are possibly terrorists, some of them are not terrorists. We can't free them. You have to put them through a trial to New York court, because the court, terrorism court is in New York. You have to give them lawyers, you have to do trials, and when they speak at their trial, they will say they will be kidnapped, held prisoners, tortured, and then the American justice has to be put up against somebody who was tortured, and it will be asked, who were you tortured? Who were you tortured by? And he will say who was, and it was the name of the people. It wasn't. So Barack Obama can't afford that. So the presentation ends, and they ask Barack Obama, let's ask him how he thinks he will close Guantanamo. So we go there, we go around, we ask Obama, Barack, how are you going to close Guantanamo down? You knew it was impossible. Turns around. He'd say, hi guys, it's too late. Next time, good night. He never closed Guantanamo down because he couldn't. At this time of appearances, it is almost impossible to compete with an image such as Barack Obama's. He had everything, didn't it? It's true, it was a revolution that a black man would become the president of the United States, but I remember that those elections, people was wondering who could win the primary, a black or a woman. And it was a black man, it was very appealing, and Hillary was an older woman, very clever, but with all she had behind the back of having been Bill Clinton's wife. And as for the social media we're talking about, I think it is impossible. There is no criticism. Everything, something new appears in our lives. It is very difficult to express your opinion against it and being called a party pooper. But you know, when you say that there are so many things that this is good about, but it's like apologizing if you disagree, because you will say that the missiles are going to be decided by artificial intelligence. I think that networks the political class should have stayed away from social media. I distrust the politician who at 11 p.m. is giving his opinion on Twitter. And we all think about people who are all the time on Twitter. Well, this is done by artificial intelligence now. Of course, and sometimes it would do it quite well because, you know, even opinion makers, you know, that one could put his name on the GPT chat and say, make an article as if it was written by Elvira Lindo. Write one. So we're a bit clumsy still about this, but it can be done, yeah. So I believe it wouldn't be necessary that any of us would be on Twitter. We may not be on Twitter. And not being on Facebook, it's cool now because it was only created for old people. and it's only people 50 years old and over. But Instagram is still open to everyone, and the image seems to smooth things down. But what need is there to be on Twitter? Well, there's ever fewer because I always make surveys with my students, my pupils, and I ask, oh, what media are you? And I say, which Twitter? There are ever fewer. Facebook, TikTok, yeah, there's a number. But Instagram, everyone. It's the image, it's the image. Yeah, but look, it's not the image that really is really which stays on. No, it's not the proof of real things. There are actors who have a lot of followers on Instagram, but they have no work. That is, we have learned how to manipulate our own image. Instagram followers can be bought. And when I found that out, I said, well, so what's the point? I mean, this person, no, you don't need to have a lot of money to buy followers. You need to know how to do, what to do to have followers on Instagram. And you might have bought them. You can also have some certain capability to find followers. Not having work, it may look like you're a graphic artist, successful graphic artist, but not having any success. You may look like something which now can be easily simulated, is that you sell a lot of books. And you're not selling many books. So it's like some connection between publishing houses. Let's say this person has only done 4 editions. Yeah, but every edition is 400 books. So yeah, you can have 10 editions. But you, on Instagram, you can advertise yourself and say, I have achieved 10 editions of this book. Yeah, but maybe you've only sold 1,500 copies of it. Or you can show that you've been invited by many centers. Yeah, but it's not so difficult. Now, bookstores ask you to go to many meetups, and you can simulate you have a successful life and that you're going from one place to another, hither and thither, but that success does not exist. It's a lie. Yeah, but it's also being consumed very quickly. Every time the trending topic are ever shorter. They used to be a day, but now it may be 1.5 hours. Yeah, well, good, because if it is something bad for you, then it goes quickly, and you write an article, and you didn't expect to, but they start criticizing you, everyone, haters and stuff. But then it's fine, because the following day, there will be somebody else that will be hated, and you're forgotten. Well, we have used up the time available, and now we're going to see if there are any questions from the audience, or, well, the question is it possible to counteract the trivialization of public space? This is the question. I believe it is important. Well, we have to rewrite grammar. And this is done at school. It's done in school. Grammar is only one thing that you have to teach again. You have to teach people again to have doubts, to ask themselves questions, about things, to not think, to not confuse propaganda and information. How could politicians make propaganda win? They did this. I'll give an example. Giorgia Meloni. She says, if I win the elections, I will stop the immigrant boats which will come to Sicily. I will make a blockade, a naval blockade, and all those who come, I will send them back to Africa. But the journalist asks, how are you going to stop all the boats that are coming in the middle of the sea? And what does she do? She doesn't she doesn't give an answer. She says, you are a left-wing journalist, you're against me. You don't want to stop them. You want them to come. And those who hear, look, you see, the journalist, I am with Giorgia Meloni, he wants to stop them, not with the journalist who wants to make them all come from Africa. So what happens? Politics has put the message across that journalists are the enemies, that all the intermediate bodies, journalists, unions, all social organizations, those who are in between, they are a problem. And they have to be eliminated so you can talk directly to the politician. The issue is that there are no longer questions, there's no context. And then what happens? Of course, Giorgia Meloni never stopped anyone in the middle of the sea. Of course, she couldn't do it. They kept coming, of course. Of course, she can't send them back to Africa because she doesn't know how to do it. So, people start saying, well, she promised, she'd have stopped them. And what does she say? Oh, I would have done it, but it is Europe's fault. It is the French, the Germans, the European Commission's fault, somebody else's fault. It's the NGO's fault. And this mechanism puts everything together. But when people start asking themselves questions again, and they start having doubts again, then we can start taking a different way. Well, when you were saying, what can we do to counteract banalization of public spaces, I think that a book like yours, Going Out at Night, or Living the Night, it is counteracting, it's telling your story in your own terms. Somehow you were talking against certain intellectual discourses which are justified an ideology, which are justified terrorism. You tell the story of your family. You say things which were not said enough in the countries which suffered from terrorism. That is, people who killed should step back, step away from public life. And that politicians should talk about social reconciling. They have to work hard to re-establish the truth. And that truth is better than vengeance. Things like this. When I take your book, and I don't know you at all, and I read this book, having seen Dario Fo's work, Accidental Death of an Anarchist, and then I read this book which connects me to that theater, and I see this is somebody who worked for truth, and thanks to his book I will understand this truth, I will know this book, and it was good for this country. But he comes here to Spain and he's telling us about things which are necessary. And there should be more books in Spain with this same type of discourse to tell the truth. When the lockdown happened, we all lived different, strange situations. How do we fight against civilization? Doctors afford doing their job, teachers doing virtual classes, delivery guys, food delivery guys. And I wonder, because I often wonder, how can we counteract this present, which is so depressing sometimes? And it is do your job well. What is your duty? What is your field? What is your task? Do it well. Because that is good for a social point. That's a beautiful closing. Thank you so very much to both the two of you.
Y bueno, vamos a recoger.
We'll have 3 questions from the public, from the audience. There's one here. We'll have the microphone right now.
Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for all the information you have given us. All I want to say is that the problem is in journalism, not on information, not culture. Culture may be a way, but I'm a pessimist. The problem is what we have been hearing in the last part of the presentations. Facts do not matter. The opinions are what matters. And what the Epictetus would said, it is the opinion, not the word. And there's disinformation because what is now there are media who create false opinion and they spread out and disseminate and they create opinions which are not based on facts. But there's an idea that leads people to think that to fight against what ideologies want to create on 2 very polarized sides on which there's so much at stake because, for instance, weapons, why has the war to be scaled up? Well, because as business, it is something that really worries me because there's no information, there's no journalism. And that really worries me a lot. Information, because the public space, everybody's space, everybody's, and it should be cared for by everyone. And the fights between TV channels to see who publishes more ads and who creates more opinion, it is a terrible problem because you may have Imam Chicho debating with politicians, and it's not the same. But that's what I feel. Well, I wanted to say that I believe there's information, but I would say so people don't buy it. There is information, but there is information, but many people want to hear the opinion, they don't want to see the information, they want to hear the opinions. So what I most enjoy about the newspaper and some TV news is good information. But there are many people who don't read the newspaper, so if you don't read the newspaper, then you can't be informed. That is the problem. Young people don't read newspapers. How do we get there? Yes, over there. And then, Javier, there's a question from the online audience. Thank you so much for the wonderful choice of speakers. I go back to the question which is on the table, and I was thinking about counteracting, and having thought about all that has been done, all the politicians have had such a weight. How does this match today's consumption of certain slogans and certain political discourses or formats that you have talked about? Which part of those consumers are the best informed or educated generations? People who have a TV in their house, but who were educated, they went to university, they have access to books and music, and how do you match that? I don't want to go back to high culture and popular culture, but how do we deal with that? We are at a time of such a loss of prestige. I am also a university teacher. Yeah, the loss of authority, yes. What do? I'm teaching history. How can I promote debate in class? I have to stop them and say, this is not a TV stage, this is not a debate, and having your opinion doesn't mean to thrash the other. And they say, what is your opinion? I'm here to make us think, not to give you such a close idea, but such a complex word of politics. They are reaching to generations which have access to different messages because we buy this. I don't know if there is an answer to this or many answers to this, but thank you for. Well, this is a good question. We'll take one more and then we'll answer. There's one over there. My question has to do on how to withstand this trivialization culture. It's related to something that's been mentioned in this very interesting debate. How do we evaluate the quality, the dictatorship of the click, of the like, which affects all the culture industries? To have more clicks helps publishing a book, being in a called for a film or getting a job. But I think that this impact dictatorship somehow it is difficult to resist because for the younger generations at least there's this idea that if you are not visible, then you become invisible. If you don't make yourself visible, you become invisible, particularly when you have a difficult working situation, an uncertain future, and you stop being relevant if you're not seen. One is one's own brand, the universities are brands, the companies are brands. So I'm not being a pessimist, but we are seeing that there are some movements now in universities and tertiary institutions which are moving away from quality rankings, who measure the quality based on the number of publishing of articles published. So I wonder if in the publishing houses there's a movement in this sense to leave this dictatorship of visibility impacts, and if not so, how could they start to move away from it? You who know from inside these words, how could this dictatorship be left aside? Yes, well, there hasn't been a lot of optimism in today's debate. I would like to send you to dinner. I would like to give you some optimism to have dinner with, otherwise your dinner would be very depressing. So we need to teach the new generations, your pupils, to explain to them that making an effort is the best thing they can do in life. Because when you conquer things through toil, they have a different taste. They're so much better. And we must not surrender to the idea that as it is being consumed, superficial information, simplifying things, trivializing things, then we have to create and produce trivialization and simple things. Today I'm the director of a publishing house of podcasts. So audio things that you listen to. Podcasts are very used in Europe, and they're heard by people who are between the age of 20 and 45. That's the largest part of the audience. When I started doing podcasts, I wanted to do foreign affairs, foreign policy podcasts. But everybody said, but look, foreign affairs, foreign policy has no interest for 20-year-olds. And I decided to take a bet. So I took a young journalist. 2 years ago, she was 26, and I was. She drew my attention because on Instagram, when Americans left Afghanistan on the 15th of August, 3 years ago, she had traveled to Afghanistan and she knew many journalists, influenced many people. She went on Instagram for 20 days, explaining every hour what was happening in Afghanistan. When she started, she had 25,000 followers. 10 days later, she had 300,000 followers because she was explaining quality information. So I asked this young journalist, her name is Cecilia Sala, if she wanted to do a podcast, a daily podcast, explaining every day a foreign policy affair, foreign affairs concept, but explaining it in a different way. Because it is true that foreign policy is not of any interest for younger people, but not to you either, if it is only done this way. Putin said, Zelensky answered, Biden said, who cares? What are we interested in? The explanation of the context, why things happened, the consequences of things. So I asked this young journalist, Cecilia Sala, and I said, I give you the possibility of traveling. Cecilia Sala was in Ukraine for 8 weeks. She went to Iran. She went to Sudan, Israel. But every day you try to explain something that has happened through the story of a person, through a fact. When she started, I talked to the podcast distribution platforms to see if they wanted to collaborate, Amazon, Spotify. And they said, no, this is not going to be of any interest. 2 years later, Cecilia Sala has a podcast followers, an audience of 600,000 people every day. Amazing how many people are following her. And she does complex things. We had a bet for a person who's an expert on China, a weekly podcast that explains for half an hour a problem, a story of the East for this week. Initially, we thought we bet, and I said, you'll see that even if you do something complicated, you'll see we'll reach at least 5,000 followers. And he said, no way, we'll not make it to 5,000. Now, all Saturdays, we have 50,000 people listening to the podcast, which 1 week talks about what is happening in the Indian politics, 1 week about death penalty in Singapore, another week technology in China. 50,000 people. The issue is, if you don't propose, if you don't give complex things, then people cannot listen, cannot hear complex things. But if you offer complex things, then the audience is there, because you find people in universities, you find the difficult thing is to produce complex, difficult things. If you think that everything has been trivialized and you have to make trivial things, it is an individual responsibility not to do trivial things. And if you try not to do trivial things, I'm sure you will be successful with complex things. And to Javier, the answer to what Javier asked, well, it is a complex thing to convincing younger people that they don't need to make themselves visible. It is complex because they were born and grew up with fighting for visibility. And that podcast Mario talks about, they are really interesting, but there are other podcasts that have to do with our time, and it's a bit of a permanent exhibition of ourselves, that is, showing things which are, and they all have to happen around your life, and being visible on the network, on the media, I know there are people who are important on the media who said, I'm not gonna be on the social media, but they are important in press, and nevertheless they are successful. But 4 years ago, this was a need, a must. On TV and radio, you have to have a number of followers. How can you tell young people that this is not the most important thing? I believe somehow this disease has to be passed of continuous expression of your ego, your individualism. It has to get to be over with, because there will be general boredom. This is happening in journalism. If I read articles, it happened to you. You read columns on newspaper. How many columns are there talking about the journalist himself? Well, it's true, the journalist has a point of view. They have to talk about how they see the world from their point of view. That is true. But there's an excess of personal stories. And there's a very ungenerous look to the world. But you have to tell people to look outside, not only your identity, not only your gender, no, you're related to 1,000 things, and often there is such a preponderance of I, and you become so important. How do you teach young people? That would be the question of Carolina's question. Well, that's very difficult, how you teach young people to do that. But on public schools, it depends on how social active teachers are. Not so much the subjects, but they have to be not only teachers, but they have to be activists. Well, thank you so much again, Mario and Elvira, and all of you. Well, Mario has come from Italy, so he has more merit. Well, but he advertised his own podcast, so we shall listen, we shall hear it. Well, we shall all hear it. Thank you so much. Thank you.